Welcome back to Track Talk. This is week 8 of the 1830 League. We are in Game A with Devouring Trey, Misher, R. Scott, and Nate. And we will jump right into the auction. The auction is notable because we will see a rather early bid from Misher on the B&O. And then actually there's an early pull from Misher, which is going to end up giving Devouring Trey and R. Scott face value privates. So pretty good for those two players. We are seeing the Camden and Amboy bid up here. Looks like it goes for 230 to Nate. And if we look at the game state here, R. Scott and Devouring Trey have a good amount of capital. The other two players are probably overcapitalized, but Nate did manage to snag enough cash to float the PRR if he wants, which we do see. Devouring is going to float the CNO. Misher is passing for now, and looks like they will be going for the CNO. The NYNH is the third company to float. Misher has invested quite heavily in the CNO and has split that presidency without priority. Can be dumped on by Devouring. So a little bit of a questionable investment. PRRs first operate in the first operating round, heading towards Lancaster, seeing a single 2 train. CNO lays the number 2 tile, but in a strange configuration, bad configuration, buys 4 2 trains, so we should be seeing that dumped. And NYNH is going to declare for the NYC, gets a pretty easy buy-in of their private as a result of the 4-2 trains bought by the CNO. So while I think it is reasonable to dump the CNO, there are consequences in the sense that it helps some of these other players. Gets the Champlain and St. Lawrence as well as the more expensive Mohawk and Hudson, and we're into stock round 2. Stock round 2, we'll see the NYNH player actually sell. Actually, for now, just floating the NYC, but we'll have to sell in order to actually float it. Nate is going to be passing, it looks like. Does buy a cheap NYNH. Devouring dumps the CNO, no surprises there. And is going to go back and steal the B&O. So Misher has had a really rough start to this game. I disagree with the auction decisions and then left himself open for a pretty devastating dump on the CNO. If these 2 trains rust, he's going to have to fall back and then buy a 4, which will completely deplete his presidency. And he's going to be behind in track, just really doesn't have privates that can buy in to rehabilitate his position. This is really a very dangerous position for him. And it's not at all unreasonable that the 4 trains would come out. You have 4 companies operating in advance of him, 2 of them with very large treasuries. This is looking really, really bad for him. R. Scott floating the NYC. Nate will buy a cheap CNO. And it looks like the rest of the stock round is basically going to be those 2 nut companies floating. Misher is making some effort to defend the B&O, but really doesn't have the liquidity to make it happen. Devouring has stolen the B&O now, and we should be just seeing the rest of these companies float. We are into operating round 2. NYC and NYNH are owned by the same president. That's always a dangerous situation for the table. NYC gets a 3 and is going to shuffle a train out of the NYNH. B&O heading towards Lancaster, should be able to get in there. Devouring was able to get $1,000 treasury with a pretty minimal investment, so that's really good for him. Would like to see some train pushing here to really slam the door shut on Misher, but is going to content himself with a single 3 train. So looks like probably the 4 is not going to come out here. Lancaster is laid and tokened by the PRR, another single 3 train, and buys in the Camden and Amboy for Max. NYNH upgrading the NY tile, runs the 3 and is going to pay it. CNO with 4-2 trains is going to run for just 40, but needs to figure out where that next train is going to come from. Is still in a little bit of trouble if the 4 comes out here. I suppose we could still see it. Is there a 3 train left? There is, so probably not going to happen. I think the B&O player would have had to be the one to push trains. NYC upgrades Albany, setting up for the double run into New York with both of his companies. Runs for 100 for now. B&O gets in Lancaster and drops the token. runs for 70, buying in his privates, and does buy another 3 train. I wish that we had seen that last operating set, or last operating round. If you're going to buy it anyways, you'd have a better run this time with it, and you may have incentivized another player to buy that 4 train. Let's see if the PRR, no, he doesn't have enough cash to make it happen. Lays Philadelphia and Trenton, is actually going to token it, runs for 140, pays it. NYNH also doesn't have cash for the 4, so it looks like CNO is going to get a little bit of a break here. Does get 2 runs into New York, or just 1 run because it only has 1 train, so it's going to shuffle with the NYC and could be able to do that next set of operating rounds. CNO has better revenue, 110, still in tough position. But you know what? With 4 shares on the market and 2 payouts that I wasn't sure they were going to get, I guess is a little bit better off than we would have expected. At stock round 3 here, Nate is going to lead us off, and he makes the kind of questionable decision to sell out of basically all the paying companies and then is just going to pass on his cash. So I would have anticipated if he was going to sell here that he would have reserved one of these presidencies or floated one of these companies, but instead is just going to pass. This gives other players, potentially Misher for instance, the opportunity to select a presidency before Nate gets another go around in the stock round. So I don't understand that play. Devouring is going to buy a paying share in his B&O. Misher is also going to buy a share there, so looks like he's not going to be taking a presidency at least for now. R. Scott buying a cheap share in the PRR. We're back to Nate, who now does get to pick a presidency and picks the CPR. Nate's other company is the PRR. He does not control the Champlain and St. Lawrence. The Erie and the B&M probably would have been better choices. Um, the B&M is probably blocked here, but the Erie has some potential. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why he didn't float this last go around of the stock round if he was dead set on doing it. Devouring is going to buy more paying shares of the B&O. Misher going for the NYC. R. Scott, last share for him, it's going to be an NYNH. Devouring buying the cheap yellow NYNH as well. Misher, still a lot of cash. Looks like everybody's going to be buying cheap shares here, and we'll see the CPR float, so we'll move through this quickly. No trashing or big changes in operating order are occurring, it looks like. We are into operating round 3. CPR is first up, and they break their own suitcase. Going to shuffle the train out of the PRR and immediately brings out the 4. So at least we do see that 4 finally coming out. Bad news for the CNO, but they were able to run those 2s twice, so maybe okay. B&O heads down to Washington for the runs. Going to run for 180. PRR heads to Pittsburgh, tokens it, runs for 100. New York heading towards Rochester. The New York and NYNH synergy is still working out quite nicely, and the NYC is actually going to go back for a second non-permanent train so he can double tap New York and then also reach Rochester. CNO trainless, as noted, is going to be totally out of cash, but still has ended up with 4 shares in the market. So probably just needs to keep paying and just replenish his shares that way, or his treasury that way. I don't know if we're ever going to see this player float another company. NYNH gets into Rochester and pays for 100. Operating around 3.2. Baltimore's upgraded. 220 now for the B&O. Pretty good revenue. CPR links in with the offboard. Is it going to withhold? NYC heading towards the Erie home. And tokens Rochester. R. Scott has priority here. So I think I would have liked to have seen him actually float the Erie or at least reserve that presidency and maybe not token Rochester. I think if you have these 3 companies and you're able to leave this corridor open, that's a pretty game-winning state. You'd have to be pretty meticulous in how you defend this corridor if you don't want to token it. You're going to have to assume that the PRR is eventually going to head up here and start attacking you, and then whoever else gets a token in Pittsburgh is going to be also incentivized. The B&M should be blockable. They would have to lay this $120 track and then attack Albany directly, which is always a threat. But yeah, I think that this Rochester token maybe was premature, especially if we see him with priority and potentially taking the Erie. Running for 210 pays at PRR, heading to the west, probably hoping for Chicago in the late game. NYNH heading towards Reading and Allentown. We haven't really talked too much about that track, which is unusual. That's usually a focus of the game. But because Lancaster was laid south, um, nobody's been able to get there yet. We'll see if this links up down into Philly and gives the New York player a run down into Baltimore. That could be pretty nice. He does token Albany. Um, so I don't think he has any interest in the Erie at this point. Those track has been shut down. Running for 100, CNO, heading towards Pittsburgh. Running for 80, pays it, and we are into stock round 4. R. Scott, as noted with priority, is going to just buy some paying shares. Nate buys his PRR, which is now floating up. I imagine we're going to see that company sold down. I imagine either Devouring or Mishra is going to try and float another company. We didn't think Mishra was going to be able to do it, but it looks like he has some options here. Devouring is selling and is going to take the Erie. Mishra also selling and will round us out on the B&M. I think the B&M is a dead letter. Already token dead Albany, doesn't have any access into New York. So probably not going to get Mishra back into this game. R. Scott is buying paying shares. Nate is selling his CPR. Didn't he just buy the CPR? We have to go back and look. No, he bought a PRR. Okay. And he is selling the CPR for B&O. Reasonable. Devouring still floating. Mishra floating. Looks like R. Scott is sitting on some cash. May want to do some trashing here. We'll see. Everybody else is floating their companies. And the Erie has now floated, so is the B&M. Is R. Scott going to do something here? Looks like he's buying an Erie, so he's probably going to trash some shares. Mishra has sold down the B&M to presumably try and operate after the Erie, but Devouring should be able to counter that with a sale of his own, which we do see. We're sitting on the Poison 4, so operating order ends up being pretty important here, and probably the Erie doesn't want to operate before the B&M if it can avoid it. R. Scott is still taking some actions here, has bought quite heavily into the Erie, so is Mishra. So this Erie company may be trashed kind of heavily here. It's sold down to 67 already. And we're into the operating round. So Erie got trashed down pretty heavily here. Still might be able to pick up a 5 train, and then the B&O, if he were to shuffle, could pick up a 5. So I don't know if this trashing really has any significance. It does hurt Devouring's net worth a fair amount. The B&M is in a position to buy the 4 and the 5, which would then give the PRR a 5 as well. So maybe that was the motivation there, just not to allow Devouring Trade to end up with 2 5s. B&O, upgrading Washington, running for 230, pretty good. B&M, upgrading his home, and is going to buy into the 5s. So PRR gets the Philly upgrade, and that token on Philly is going to work out for him pretty well. Also gets the second 5 train. NYC train lot is not going to get a 5, but it is laying the Erie home for some reason. Withholding, worried about permanent trains. CPR has cash to lay the track west and is going to withhold. Erie is laying its home towards the double O's and is going to shuffle and then buy a 5. And I think that means the B&O will get a 6. Yes. So Devouring's fine. He has survived his train rush, and the other players are going to be left in the lurch trying to afford permanent trains. CNO does get a track or a token down in Pittsburgh, but is going to shuffle a train out of the B&M. NYNH upgrades New York, 100% of the revenue of this company is available to R. Scott, so that's a saving grace there. He's going to withhold, I don't know, maybe needed to pay there. You get 100% of the revenue either way. This puts him into brown. I don't think he wants to end in brown. He doesn't have priority. With a pay, he will end up in orange at least. But even with two pays, he would have stayed yellow. So I don't know if he can really afford or should be withholding here. I think he needs permanence on both companies. It's probably a pretty small difference, but I'm surprised we didn't see a pay. B&O gets the Baltimore upgrade and is going to buy a 6 here, I'm sure. A little bit surprised we see the Baltimore upgrade and not the Lancaster upgrade. This Reading and Allentown track is still available, and if the upgrade on Readington Allentown and on F19 work out, or F18 work out for the B&O, we could potentially see double runs into New York. Well, I guess the B&O is tokened at Philly, so not a double run for the B&O, but the PRR could make it happen. Maybe that's why he doesn't upgrade here. He doesn't want to see that. Okay. 6 comes out. PRR is going to head over to Chicago. B&M lays Providence of all places. Had the cash to lay the $120 track. That probably is the better long-term play. This is only going to upgrade for 30. It's short-term more money, but it puts you behind in tempo and trying to bypass Albany. Not sure. I guess it's reasonable. It is painful to lay that track though and know you're getting nowhere. Runs for 80, pays it. NYC upgrades Albany and runs for 190. Does have money for the D train upgrade. And if he were to do that, he would be in quite a bit of trouble probably. D train upgrade, and I don't know if he gets the 6 on the NYNH. The CPR probably is able to snag a 6, so he would be in trouble if he had to buy both Ds. But can he really avoid buying both Ds? I don't know that he can, because even if he doesn't upgrade here, CPR still can emergency buy the 6, and then he's still in that same situation. So R. Scott's in a lot of trouble here. He needs 2 permanent trains, and I don't think he can ensure that he gets a 6. Maybe if he buys the 6 here and then shuffles the 4 into the NYNH, he can just delay the train rush because the CPR could also do that. It's a little bit of a prisoner's dilemma. If you are going to try and do that, you have to make sure that Nate doesn't just emergency buy the D. I don't think he would. So I think that's probably what R. Scott has to do, just buy the 6 and then shuffle the 4 around. And that's what we'll see. Okay, Erie, laying track, still doesn't have a run, unfortunately. CPR, trainless, is going to shuffle the 4, so we will be seeing a little bit of a stall here on this D train. And who does that benefit? C&O with 2 trains, I'm sure they're happy about that. And then Devourin Tray with already his permanent trains is probably happy about that as well. C&O 2 trains, but I don't think they have 2 trains worth of runs, at least not very good ones. So running for 230, decent. NYNH last operate is going to shuffle again. So 2 players in a little bit of trouble here, Nate and R. Scott, in terms of D trains. Misher and Devouring Tray are in a little bit of a better position. Misher has the permanent train in the C&O. Does need a permanent train in the B&M actually, so he's also in trouble. So is this just Devouring Trey's game? It might be. If there's enough of a stall, these other players have a chance. But I think if one of them pushes, which is possible, Devouring with his train liability coverage should be able to take this. He doesn't have the most cash into this stock round, but it's not the hugest difference. May not even be a difference of a share. So he's going to stay right neck and neck in terms of paying shares and share density. Nate is buying the NYC. Devouring is going to buy his own B&O. He can ensure that that pays out, so very reasonable. Misher buying the PRR. R. Scott B&O, that company's floating now. Nate B&M I think if you're one of these players, you have to look towards Devouring's companies just because you know that he has both of his permanent trains and doesn't have to withhold or shuffle. I don't know about buying these other players' companies that are likely to withhold and maybe shuffling trains or dumpable. Devouring, buying a PRR, Misher, PRR, that company is also floating now. This is a dump company for Nate, but Nate is probably unwilling or unlikely to dump it because the CPR is so bad. So if he were to dump the PRR, he's going to be running potentially good trains in a bad company. Misher's going to just pass Niger. Arscott buying the Erie, that is Devouring's yellow company, very reasonable purchase. Nate gonna round out the Erie market. There are still shares available. Devouring might go back for an IPO. Doesn't have cash for it actually. So we'll go for the cheap CPR. Misher, NYC, and R. Scott floating that company. Nate, last share for him is going to be a CPR. R. Scott and Erie. So it looks like the operating order is going to be unchanged here. R. Scott is still taking actions, wants to buy and sell the Erie, puts it further into yellow. And we'll pass into operating round 5. So I think that this is starting to look like Devouring's game. The other players are in a lot of trouble, and Devouring has decent runs on the B&O. The Erie runs are not great and doesn't have any capability of running into that southern track. So we need to see what happens with this double O. But I think that the fact that he just has his permanent trains covered is going to be enough for a win. And I think the name of the game here is just how quickly this D train comes out. So let's move through this quickly until someone is able to do it. Pittsburgh's upgraded, runs for 210. PRR is getting access into Chicago. So actually has a very efficient 5 train run from Chicago to New York, but still needs a permanent train in the CPR. B&M is stuck with pretty bad runs. NYC looking to head towards the double O and contest that Erie track lay. CNO 2 trains is running for 250, pretty good. Just going to pay out. Doesn't look like anybody's withholding to try and bring out a D. Having said that, it looks like the CPR will is halfway there for the upgrade. Erie doesn't have cash for that double O. It's going to get a run finally and is withholding. I presume that's just to stay yellow. Otherwise, I think Devouring needs to pay and just hope these other players fall behind. We finally see the Reading and Allentown track laid, and the NYNH is going to pay for 150. Really, not a lot of progress is being made toward this D. Nobody is eager to bring it out. Bino running a 6 for just 220, not the best. PRR, not sure where he's heading in the West. B&M, really not a whole lot of track development available to them, running for 100. NYC does get the double O, but this opens up track for the Erie to actually run through. So that's probably not that great for the NYC. And I think he probably should be tokening that, although I understand he needs a permanent train, so is reluctant to do it. But a token here would secure his late game runs. Running for 240, CNO, heading over to Columbus. And his runs are a little bit better. Now he's withholding, so may see a D train coming out soon here. He's got $500 towards it. But these 4 trains are getting a lot of runs. This is kind of bad for Devouring, who wanted them to rust a lot earlier, I'm sure. CPR is going to shuffle with the PRR, so it looks like Nate will be the one to bring out a D train here in 5.3. Erie, he's going to upgrade, and he does drop a token. So his runs should be okay. He's going to withhold again. A little bit surprised by that. NYNH, not sure where he's heading, and he's going to pay. B&O running a 6, has a pretty decent 6 run for 220. PRR was shuffled with the CPR, and it looks like Nate is going to sell out heavily, or at least sell some, to out of pocket a D train and get this game off to the races. B&M without a train now is going to shuffle. Definitely don't want a D train in the B&M, so he's going to shuffle so he gets the run in the CNO at least. CNO's run is not that great either, but will be better. NYC heading west through the double O's. It's going to withhold. CNO Looks like he is going to finally pick up that D train. Does have to sell as well. CPR, run it for 160, pays it. NYNH is going to shuffle. So R. Scott is the only player who's not bought a D train yet. And I think that's because he realizes there's a stock round coming up, so doesn't want to deplete his cash. Erie heading towards the off board for that, and it's going to finally pay out 140. We're into stock round 6. Everybody but R. Scott has their train liability covered. Devouring is in the lead, and R. Scott is his closest competitor but owes $500 for a train. Devouring does not lead in shares technically, which is, I guess, the only downside for him, but has opened a pretty commanding lead in this game. Nate has priority. We do see that the NYNH is in brown with a permanent train, so those are pretty attractive company. That's a pretty attractive company in good shares. This would not be dumpable even if R. Scott struggled to shuffle and buy a D train. So pretty good news for Nate. I think that will probably get him back in the game buying those shares. But instead is going to buy C&O. So got given a gift by priority is going to turn his nose up at it, and Devouring is going to make sure he doesn't get dumped on, and we'll just snag those NYNH shares. So I think that's game. Devouring just got given 4 shares, was already in the lead. Those NYNH shares are going to be pretty good. The runs are decent, and I don't see how another player wins at this point. Nate's runs are secure, and the map is pretty cut up already, so these D runs are not going to be incredible. If you give someone 4 free shares in the late game, I think they're just going to win the game. So that was questionable. Let's watch the rest of the stock round, but we probably can just call this for Devouring. Misher, going to buy a C&O. R. Scott, B&M. Nate, NYC. Devouring, just widening his share lead. Misher and R. Scott are passing. R. Scott has a ton of cash to invest, but all the shares in companies that are likely to pay ahead of him have been bought, except for these B&M shares. They would come at an $8 revenue hit, and I think it's only running for $8 anyways. No, it's running for 100. So buying those B&M shares and floating it up would increase his net worth before he has to buy in a D train in the NYC. Nate is out of cash. Devouring is continuing to buy shares because why not? R. Scott's passing, so Devouring is just going to continue to open up a massive share lead here, and has won this game. So let's just look at this for a second. He has 7 shares on the closest players, and one of those players has to sell to buy a train. The B&O's run is not amazing, but it's not going to be any worse than it is now. And the Erie run has room for growth. So he's good. I mean, unless he leaves himself open for a dump, NYNH is not dumpable, CPR is not dumpable. He's not open for a dump, so there's no way to change this game state. The D runs are not going to be good. So Devouring wins. Yeah, I don't think there's anything anybody can do about it. Let's skip through these operating rounds. Notice that there's not a whole lot of track going on here. Did that D train get bought by the NYC? It did. So now Devouring is $1,100 ahead of his competitors. And if we just look at the revenue here, Devouring is running for more than everyone. I think he withheld here. He did on the Erie. So even with the withhold is neck and neck with everybody and has widened his lead. The market has 1 more operating round probably, maybe 2. So we'll just skip here. Devouring wins. And by a margin of $700. Yeah. So giving him those 4 shares was a huge mistake, and he may have won otherwise, but he is able to win very comfortably with that. Well played to him. We'll go into game B here. Game B is going to be contested between River Fiend, Heart of Dior, HJM, and King Zombie. The auction in this game is not interesting. We're going to go right into the stock round and see that everyone has a decent distribution of privates. Heart of Dior has the Camden Amboy in priority, but doesn't have quite enough cash to float it, so people were aware of that. is going to reserve the presidency, but we'll have to float in stock round 2. HJM is going to go for the CNO, King Zombie for the NYNH. River Fiend looks like they're going to be sitting on their private revenue. Everyone's just buying their shares, and we had a 2-company float. Operating round 1 is going to be fairly standard. CNO buys a train and heads towards Chicago, and YNH is opening towards the B&M. Does buy 2 trains, which I think we've seen a couple times now. People are trying to split the difference between the aggressive 3-train start and just a standard 1 train. But we'll see. We'll monitor that. Stock round 2 is up now, and we should be seeing Heart of Dior float at least, potentially River Fiend as well. River Fiend is going to float the B&M actually to take advantage of the track laid by the NYNH. So just hoping to leave the B&O unfloated and stay that $30 of revenue. Heart of Dior is going to be able to float the PRR, and everyone else is just going for paying shares here. So this should leave Heart of Dior with priority, and it looks like that's what we see. PRR, first operate, is heading east towards Lancaster, buys a 2. B&M is not going to lay any track and force the NYNH to do it for him, which I think is definitely the right move, like that. CNO heading towards Chicago, running for 70, and is going to buy in their private here. NYNH has to lay the Providence track and even token it to take advantage of the 2 trains. Is going to withhold, buy a 3, and then buys in the expensive privates. We're into stock round 3. Stock round 3 is going to be mostly notable for Zombie stealing the B&O, and everybody else is basically just buying paying shares. So we can move through that quickly. We are into operating round 3. B&O is going to head up towards Lancaster. Love that. Buys the 2 out of the NYNH to shuffle a little bit more cash, and then the B&O is going to buy the 3. The NYNH is looking at probably a 3 or 2 3s, so it can run this little corridor that it's set up for itself. CNO is laying the number 2, is able to run 2 trains and pays it. PRR gets into Lancaster, tokens it, and is going to buy a 3 as well. So we're inching towards those 4s. Is going to buy in the Camden and Amboy a little bit early here. B&M single 2 train does need to buy a 3 or run the risk of falling back trainless. Upgrading his home, which makes sense because doesn't want to token Providence just yet. Buys the 3 and the 4 actually. So the NYNH is not going to have a very good run here. Going to run Providence into Boston and pays it. Does he buy a 4 as well? He does. B&O, we're into operating 3.2, is going to get into Lancaster and token it. Bad news for the CNO. Is going to withhold. CNO heading over towards Pittsburgh is paying. PRR gets the Camden or the Philadelphia track, runs for 100. B&M, it does token Providence, so I think the B&M has played this really nicely. Very efficient use of this position on the map. It's going to run 2 trains for 170. NYNH running 2 trains now, also for 170. Nobody has upgraded New York yet, and we're into stock round 4. Stock round 4, we're going to see a CPR float. That'll be very soon here. Here we see it. Everybody else is just paying shares, so we will move through this quickly and just move into the operating round here. Operating round 4, B&O is going to upgrade Baltimore. Runs for 120. PRR is going to link up with a CPR in Pittsburgh, running for 120. B&M still not able to upgrade New York, but has decent revenue. So if things stay unchanged here, I think that the B&M and the NYNH are going to slowly pull ahead. CNO upgrading Pittsburgh does drop the token. CPR, is this suitcaseable? We didn't talk about that in the stock round. It looks like it is. CPR is going to buy a train out of the PRR, which is its only train, so that company is going to fall back, unfortunately, and leaves itself a lot of cash in the PRR, but does buy in her private and blocks herself. So I think that did that just fine. is able to get the suitcase on the CPR and plays it safe, leaving $80 for this track in case somebody comes up here to break the suitcase. She will have decent run potential still. NYH is going to run the same track, and we're into 4.2. B&O gets into Philly, runs for 120. PRR Trainless is going to buy a 4, so we're sitting on the poison 4, and then buys the train back out of the CPR. So that is a little bit painful to make that suitcase happen, but now is in a pretty good position. B&M running the same track. C&O looks like they're heading up towards the double O's. Interesting that they choose to run into the DIT. NYH, same track. CPR does spend the $80. And this is just, again, so that they have the opportunity of running to the west if someone breaks that suitcase. But this doesn't actually give them a route, so just safe play. In this stock round, there are 2 companies left that are available. HJM is going to sell and take the Erie for max. King Zombie is going to buy some paying shares. River Fiend is going to sell and take the NYC for max. So operating order here is going to be important for a lot of players. We're sitting on the Poison 4. 2 new companies are operating, and King Zombie has permanent train money. So the relative operating order between these companies and the B&O is going to be pretty important. Looks like Dior is going to actually sell the C&O and buy an NYH. Decent revenue potential until those trains rust. HJM is going to continue to float the Erie. King Zombie is actually selling the NYH, so has a lot of cash and is going to buy a C&O. See if he continues to trash companies. Also selling out of the PRR. NYC is floating. Dior sells pretty heavily out of the suitcase CPR, very reasonable. Has a lot of cash for paying shares here now. Quilter is buying the Erie still. Zombie is sitting on $300 of cash. River Fiend NYC. Dior is still buying paying shares. These 2 companies are getting close to floating, and I've seen Zombie pass a couple times now. So sitting on this much cash with new companies floating, I expect to see some trashing here. Nearly floating with these new companies, and HJM is going to sell the Erie behind the NYC. I think that's reasonable. Don't want to operate first if you don't have to. Zombie's going to buy that share. River Fiend sitting on 60%. HJM using the cash that she got from the Erie sale to buy a NYH. That company's floating up. Zombie sells the Erie, so just hurting their net worth. Doesn't actually change operating order though. And now he's going to go for the NYC. So I think River Fiend should be expecting 3 shares to be bought and sold. May want to sell a share in advance to just save himself a little bit net worth, and then go back and buy a paying share. Looks like HJM is going to do some further trashing. Zombie is still working on the NYC. Does River Fiend want to do anything about this? Doesn't look like it. And the NYC is trashed 3 slots as a result. So King Zombie has managed to get himself to operate right after the Erie. Could see him pick up a quick 5 as a result. The downside of this is Zombie now has a lot of cash and needs to find places to kind of put it away. River Fiend is trashing the CPR of all things. I mean, that company's headed towards the bottom of the stock market. There's nothing really that you need to do to speed that along, I don't think. A lot of people still taking actions here. Heart of Dior is going to trade out for a B&M share. That is dumpable. Zombie buying C&O. Again, C&O. Looks like everybody's passing except for Zombie. So he has bought up quite heavily into the C&O, and this is a pretty complicated state of shares, I would say. Zombie has put himself last in priority, so these 2 players on the NYH should feel pretty safe from dumps. And so is Heart of Dior here on the B&O. The River Fiend B&M is dumpable on Heart of Dior if they aren't careful. And then the C&O is very dumpable on Zombie if he isn't careful. The C&O track is not great. Can run from Chicago to Baltimore, but it really depends on how this train rush occurs. I think there are a couple players that are potentially at risk here of dumps. we'll pass into the operating round 5. We'll have to keep an eye on the train roster here, see who ends up breaking into the 5s. B&M, not going to be the one to do it. Pays for 170. C&O, heading towards the other track that she is going to be running with her Erie company. Runs for 90. Erie is going to lay towards the east and can buy a 4 and a 5 here if they want. Would otherwise have to shuffle with the C&O and cause that company to fall back. Looks like that's going to be the strategy. That's a ton of money in the C&O. Could buy permanent trains in the C&O and then buy them both across into the Erie and dump this company. There's nobody that can stop that dump at this point. So I think if I'm King Zombie, I'm a little bit nervous here. Got no permanent trains, not very healthy treasury, and in a very dumpable position. If King Zombie were dumped upon, HJM Quilter is probably in a decent position for the win if there's a bankruptcy. These two players are her closest competitors, and they both also have train liability. So we'll see. Pretty volatile game state. B&O, gonna run for 120, pays it, buys a 4 out of the NYNH, and I think that's because that gives the NYNH 5 train money, even with just a payout. So it must be anticipating that the NYC is not going to shuffle here, and instead is going to buy the 4 and the 5. NYC heads to the southwest, does buy the 4 and the 5. Good prediction from Zombie. He's going to run and pay it and buys the second 5. PRR is actually going to cut the C&O in Dunkirk. So I think that company, the C&O I'm speaking of, is very dumpable. Doesn't have any access to the double O's now. CPR is just working on securing their suitcase, and we're into 5.2 B&M. No money for a permanent train, but is going to pay, actually withhold 240. C&O has money for the 5 and the 6. Nicely done from HJM Quilter. Buys the 5, buys the 6. And we'll see. This is going to be her opportunity on the Erie to dump this company. We'll see if she takes advantage of it. Philly gets laid into New York. B&O is going to run its 4 and pays. Erie gets a run into Rochester, tokens it, buys a 5, but doesn't buy 2 trains, so I don't think we're going to see that C&O dump after all. At least not this time. NYNH paying for 150, NYC 2 trains, and is making a beeline for Reading and Allentown. We'll see if he actually gets in there. PRR upgrades Lancaster, withholds, and is withholding on a company they own 90% of the revenue for, so probably should just be paying that for the stock appreciation in the late game. Also would leave herself ledged and not able to be trashed. Okay. CPR is very safe as a suitcase now. People will have to work up through these double O's to get into Ottawa to give her a run, and that's going to take a very long time. Stock round 6. So here we'll see Zombie leading with shares and net worth, but is still lacking a permanent train. His companies have decent runs, but I do worry about this C&O situation. He's always going to be behind HGM in priority, and this is going to be kind of a sort of Damocles just kind of hovering over him for the rest of the game unless he sells. A little bit surprised we didn't see the dump already, to be honest. So definitely some liabilities for Zombies, although he's in the lead right now. River needs a permanent and probably doesn't have good runs for the D. Dior also needs a permanent train, but has a pretty safe suitcase, and it's a little bit unusual that she would still need a permanent train with a suitcased company. It has really missed out on this train rush to date. And then rounding it out, HJM has her trains, but her track is pretty lacking, has been tokened out at the double O, and the Erie has a lot of track points it needs to develop track. I think overall this probably favors Zombie if he can afford his trains, but he definitely has some liabilities. I'll also note that the D train may come out early since the PRR is already halfway there. So there's definitely risk of a bankruptcy in this game, I would say, especially if something gets dumped. River Fiend is going to buy a paying share in the NYNH. Heart of Dior is going to buy another B&O. HJM Quilter, NYC. King Zombie buying the NYC as well. And actually, he's going to dump the B&O. I don't think I saw that coming. The B&O's runs are still pretty good. And this means that Zombie has just a permanent train in the NYNH. He has a ton of cash for paying shares, um, but this is going to reduce the amount of map presence he has. And does he win if there's a bankruptcy? If the PR, well, I think we were talking about the PRR bringing out the D train. That becomes a lot less likely if Heart of Dior is now worried about bankrupting herself. So I don't know if that's really in King Zombie's interest. He doesn't have any four trains to run, and he's trailing in shares now, has a ways to come back in terms of paying shares. So already in a dumpable position on the CNO, likely to be last in priority since he has so much cash now, and is potentially going to leave himself dumpable on other companies if he buys a lot of shares in them. All right, well, I guess just was really not interested in running a D train in that B&O. River Fiend paying share in the Erie. Heart of Dior buying a B&O now that it's her company. HGM is going to sell out of the PRR. Reasonable, I guess, because you're assuming Heart of Dior is going to be withholding pretty heavily. Buying an NYC. King Zombie going for the Erie. Heart of Dior, more B&O shares. Looks like Zombie is going to be one of the last players buying shares here and is investing even heavier into HJM Quilter. So his portfolio is very closely aligned with HJM's. Going back for the PRR and is going to pass. So I kind of understand the dump of the B&O, but it is very painful for King Zombie, and he is still dumpable on the C&O. So even though he's eliminated some train liability, may find himself with even more train liability in just a few operating rounds here. B&M laying the NY tile, withholding, and is going to shuffle into the NYC. So may see the D train coming out from River Fiend on this NYC company. We are up to the CNO. CNO is upgrading Baltimore, running for 210, pays it. NYNH upgrades New York and runs for 190. Erie, working on getting it over to Albany, running for just 70. B&O gets the Reading upgrade and gives access into New York for Philadelphia and Baltimore. The B&O does have money for a token. Maybe wants to look at the token on Philly here and would have a pretty nasty D run if they got it. Because can run into New York through Philly down into Baltimore and then back out of Philly into Albany and destinations north. It's going to withhold NYC, upgrades Albany, does token, okay? So B&O's runs are cut and the NYC's runs are secured. This does put him, unfortunately, out of range for the D train upgrade, but I think that was only a $40 token anyways, so would have been shy regardless. Should be able to pick up a 6 here, and actually doesn't. Why is that? River Fiend would have had both permanent trains here. Are they worried that somebody bankrupts if that 6 is bought? I don't think that's a reasonable fear. Heart of Dior is the only one that's going to be pushing for a D and is halfway there on two companies. I think that River should have bought the 6 there and just run two trains with both of his companies until someone brings out a D. I think that would be strictly better. I'm not sure about that. But regardless, doesn't buy the 6. PRR, laying an upgrade into Baltimore, I guess. Not really sure what that track accomplishes. Withholding, very close to D-Train upgrade. CPR still suitcased. CNO, looking to, I guess, get track for the Erie company. Pays for 210. NYNH, upgrading into Albany. B&M, heading down into Philadelphia. Erie, not entirely sure. I guess just hoping to eventually get into Albany. pays for 70 still. B&O running for 230, withholding. Heart of Dior still needs D trains. It should be pretty close to them at this point. NYC upgrading Albany and is going to withhold again. Does have money for the D train upgrade and takes it. Who ended up with that 6 train? Did I miss that? Looks like the PRR did. So Heart of Dior's fine. She's $300 off a D train in the B&O, and I think has decent runs for both of her companies. Probably would have preferred to run a 6 train in the B&O instead of a D because it's been tokened in Philly and Pittsburgh, but not the end of the world. Maybe should have secured this token and then would have been in a little bit of a better position. But by no means out of the game, I wouldn't say. I guess I can't really say that without looking at net worth and game position, but just in terms of runs, has decent potential. PRR heading towards Chicago. CPR still suitcased. Last operating round of this set. CNO still looking to link up with the Erie. Pays for 210. NYNH gets a run into Rochester. Pays it. B&M is looking to bypass Rochester. Erie gets the run into Albany. I keep saying Albany. Erie's track is underwhelming here. Already had the run into Albany, doesn't need this sharp turn. And really, shouldn't they be looking at either preventing the link up with these companies north or getting a link up into Pittsburgh themselves? I'm not sure. Runs for 200. Are they going to buy the train out of the CNO? No. So it looks like King Zombie is going to be safe from the dump again. B&O runs into Washington and does aboard the D. PRR gets into the double O's, pays for 270. D train on the NYC, looking to head towards Pittsburgh or I presume Dunkirk and bypass Rochester that way. Decent D run, runs for 250. CPR, suitcased, we're into stock round 7. Priority matters here, so we'll see who ends up with what shares, but I think we can mostly skip it and just look at the share lead at the end. Zombie is going to have 18 shares. He is in the lead, but trailing River Fiend and HJM Quilter. Did not end up with priority still vulnerable to this dump that we've been talking about. We'll see if that ever comes to pass. Heart of Dior also in a dumpable position. And HJM Quilter, in theory, dumpable as well, since we have this suitcase, which it looks like River Fiend has stolen. It would be reasonable to just shuffle trains into the CPR temporarily in order to open up for a dump and then buy it back into one of your other companies. I don't know if that's really a priority for them. He only would really want to dump on someone that was ahead of him, and I guess that HJM Quilter is technically ahead of him, but if Zombie's going to win this game, dumping on HJM doesn't do anything for you. Zombie is also dumpable in the PRR, though the B&O has no cash to make it happen. The stock value of these two companies is close enough that you could, in theory, see a change in the operating order to make the B&O dumpable instead. That would be interesting. So I guess where I'm going with this is that although Zombie has a lead, there's a lot of players that can do something about that if they want to. But if they just continue running the status quo, may see Zombie take this. CNO linking up with Rochester, paying for 210. A little bit surprised we see that instead of the gentle curve here to get into Albany and New York. That would probably be better revenue than dead ending in Rochester. NYNH is going to run the same track. 220 pays it. Erie is going to bypass their own token in Rochester and does have a decent run now, 230. This would be a track that would be very, I think, amenable to running 2 trains if she wanted. So really should consider dumping this CNO. B&M is going to just lay a further bypass of Rochester. NYC D train looking to bypass Pittsburgh eventually. It looks like that's going to be very hard to do. Needs 2 upgrades to make that happen. PRR Getting into those double O's further, pays for 330. Beano run is going to be 310 on the D train. CPR, new president, same story, suitcased. CNO, not sure where they're heading, just paying for 270. NYNH, looks like they are going to block this attempted bypass by, I believe it was the NYC player. Runs for 220. Erie, more kind of meaningless track. B&M running for 190. One thing we neglected is that it looks like the CNO got a token in New York. NYC run has been cut by that CNO token. So it's going to be running for 230 instead of 250. PRR doesn't loop back down into this double O. So it's going to lose a little bit of revenue by heading west. We'll have to watch and see where they end up. B&O, no real meaningful track for him, 310. CPR suitcased. CNO, last operation for this company, is going to head towards Columbus. Pays for 270. NYNH, done in this game pretty much, running for 220. Erie, $5. Decent run of 230. And again, does not buy a train out of the CNO. So when you look at this, if she were to dump the CNO, she would not have the ability to buy shares, which may be the reason she didn't want to do this. Could have done it earlier in the game and would have had shares to buy then, but it looks like we will not be seeing that dump that we've been hoping for. B&M runs for 190. NYC, just 230. PRR gets into Washington. Does that give it a better run? No, I don't think it does. Still running for 330. B&O, that might help the B&O though. Looks like its run is the same. CPR falling back, and we're into stock round 8. So let's look at the game state here. Very, very close between HJM and King Zombie. HJM does have a share lead and has a little more map presence, but I think the map is calcified to the point that track lays don't matter. And if we think about this situation that we've been talking about, the CNO company, it's a little bit hard of a decision. HJM could dump this, and we are going to be in the last set of operating rounds. So if the CNO is dumped, you're going to find King Zombie having to shuffle trains. I don't think he's going to fall on a D. The NYNH would float up to operate ahead of the CNO the first time. So the NYNH would get one more run, but then the next 2 operating rounds, he's going to be shuffling. So you're denying functionally 5 runs on his shares. So that's, 9 shares lost to King Zombie versus 5 shares lost to HJM Quilter. And then HJM Quilter is still running the 6 train in her other company, which she has more shares than King Zombie in, so is still pulling ahead on the Erie. In a game this close, I think that dump is probably advisable, even if she can't replace the shares. I totally understand the hesitancy, but I think that that would probably be enough to give her the win. These other 2 players are far enough behind, and the revenue is similar enough between these companies that I don't think they are contenders for the win at this point. Having said that, there's really nothing that happens in this stock round, and if we just look at the revenue in the operating rounds, we'll see that HJM Quilter is running for slightly more than King Zombie, but the share or the net worth lead is going to be just high enough that she will ultimately fall short of the win by $150. So I think that King Zombie played fine. It was a very risky strategy, and HJM Quilter just didn't capitalize on it. I think if that dump happens, HJM wins this game. We'll bring us to game C. And this game is going to be contested by Juicy Berry, A. Murphy, MP Coin, and Too Many Revenants. We are going to skip the auction again and go right into stock round 1. The CNO and PRR are going to float here, and we will see that MP Coin is going to invest quite heavily in the CNO. We saw this in, I believe, game A, and that ended pretty poorly for our friend Misher. We'll see if MP Coin has any better luck. The difference here is that MP Coin actually does have priority, so should feel pretty secure in this investment compared to Misher's condition. Operating round 1, the CNO is going to head towards Toledo, a little bit unusual there. PRR is heading towards Lancaster. Both companies buy 1-2 train. Stock round 2, MP Coin is going to pass to start, but then is going to lose priority because Too Many Revenants is buying shares. So will feel unsafe in the CNO and actually sells out and is going to float the NYNH with a PRR sell as well. Too Many Revenants is going to pick up some cheaper shares as a result of these sells, and we will be into operating round 2. NYNH heading towards the NYC and is going to buy a single 2 train. CNO heading towards Toledo, so has $20 less revenue than they should if they just headed towards Chicago. And are they going to token Toledo? I think they have to if they want to run better trains or better revenue. Looks like they did not token, and they do pick up a second train. So they're going to be running a DIT in Toledo instead of a DIT in Chicago, which is just going to be strictly worse in the early game. PRR tokens Lancaster, and we are into stock round 3. Nobody's been able to buy in privates. Too Many Revenants has been coasting and is going to sell out of his paying shares and float the NYC, so he's able to take advantage of the track laid by MP Coin. Juicy Berry will pick up some of those cheaper shares that have been sold, so will A Murphy. MP Coin selling 1 share in the NYNH and buys a CNO. CNO's revenue is still going to be decent, but a little bit worse than it would usually be. Too Many Revenants is going to be floating, and we are into the third operating round. NYC is first up, lays towards New York, buys 2 twos and a 3, so he can buy in his private, and is going to kill the CPR suitcase. It is painful for the NYC player to do this, especially just for the Champlain and St. Lawrence. It's only $80. A lot of train money has been spent, and your treasury depleted for that. CNO has access to the green track and could have upgraded Toledo, but is going to instead lay the double DIT running for $90 and also picks up a 3. Going to buy in their privates. PRR heading towards Pittsburgh, running for just 40 and buys a 3 in their private. NYNH last to operate, upgrades Albany is going to token it and withholds, buys the 3, buys 2 3s even, so really depleting their treasury, and has to buy the CNA for just 280 rather than 320. A little bit of a loss of efficiency there. Juicy Berry is first up in stock round 4, is going to buy an NYC. A Murphy, a paying NYNH. MP Coin is selling out and floats the B&M. In terms of the B&M, MP Coin is the NYNH player and had the option of the New Haven track, laid towards New York, or towards Albany, but has left the B&M player potential to get into New York with this choice of double DIT. So was doing a little bit of a gambit in terms of making both of these companies potentially viable. Regardless, ends up with the B&M, pretty low par on both of his companies, so may struggle with permanent trains. Too Many Revenants is going to buy a cheap CNO. Juicy Berry, PRR. A Murphy going for the NYC. MP Coin still floating. Looks like pretty much everyone is going to be buying their last shares here, although A Murphy is passing on a lot of money. B&M has floated and will sell to buy 1 more NYNH, and we will pass into the next operating round. A Murphy is sitting on enough cash for probably 2 shares here. Not entirely sure what that's about. First company to operate will be the CNO. They are still not upgrading Toledo and are going to neglect to token. So running just 2 trains, is able to hit Chicago for 130, but this track development has been pretty inefficient. PRR lays the Philadelphia tile and blocks himself. Runs for 110. B&M is going to lay Providence, and I'm sure is hoping to get into New York, but I'm sure the NYC player is going to be watching that and have something to say about it. Runs for 170, or actually buys from the NYNH a train so that it can consolidate its treasuries. NYNH, or I'm on a roll in terms of mistakes here. NYC is going to lay the sharp turn, and the purpose of this is not because he wants to run into the DIT or Providence, but it's just because there's no green upgrade that will get the B&M into New York now. So pretty savvy play there. Running for 120, pays it. NYNH He's going to upgrade the New York tile, runs both of its trains for 140, and is going to withhold. I think that's reasonable. He did par pretty low on both of his companies, and I believe is going to be train lot shortly. No, not yet, but does need to worry about permanent trains. CNO is upgrading Toledo, but actually upgrades it without the K, so cannot token there and run 2 trains into Chicago. More inefficiency. Runs for 140 now. PRR, upgrading Lancaster, should have pretty easy access to Reading and Allentown. Runs for 130. NYC gets the green upgrade into New York, so had to delay his run into New York, but New York wasn't even upgraded last time. This is the opposite of the CNO track. This is very efficient play out of Too Many Revenants. Running for 190. B&M is blocked at F18 and will instead upgrade his home. Runs the 3 train for 80. NY&H is going to upgrade Providence for his other company, runs for 190, pays it out. We're into stock round 5. And one thing that I kind of neglected is that nobody has been buying trains. So we're in stock round 5 and there's 2 trains still available. That is a very slow start to this train roster. We will see Too Many Revenants selling out to float the B&O. Not the most attractive company when it floats this late in the game. Very unlikely that it will end up with a Lancaster token. However, in this particular game, Lancaster has blocked itself in Philadelphia, so maybe this is not the most important tile anymore and could just head over to Atlantic City and hope to get into Philadelphia that way. We'll have to monitor that. Reasonable to float it, but a little bit late to have great track. Juicy is going to buy paying shares. Looks like everybody else is doing the same. Too Many Revenants is just floating, so we're going to just skip into the next operating round here. First run of the B&O, he is in fact going to head towards Atlantic City and hope to get into New York via Philadelphia that way. And he's going to shuffle a train out of the NYC and just content himself with that, which means that the NYC is going to get to run his 2 trains, but nobody else will. And then he's going to bring out the 4. So very efficient play again from Too Many Revenants, playing this game pretty well. Has a ton of cash in the NYC, does have some train liability in the B&O, but is starting to open up a little bit of a lead here. CNO, not able to run those 2 trains anymore, does have a run into Chicago via Toledo, and is interestingly going to drop a token in Detroit. So very unconventional track laying in the west part of this map here. PRR heading into New York via Reading and Allentown, and is going to drop the token there. Don't like to see that token. I think if you're going to have to drop a token, you should drop it in Philly, this northern city, to prevent the B&O runs from getting into New York. The New York tile doesn't block anyone and doesn't give you access to any runs that you didn't already have. So running for 110, B&M, no track for them, running for just 90, buying a 4. NY&H, gonna link up with Rochester, it looks like, and also is buying a 4. So MP Coin is really doubling down on this early money strategy. We are now sitting on the poison 4. MP Coin is train locked in both companies and has very little treasuries. So it really needs to hope for a stall here. And I don't know that that's really reasonable. We have 2 companies that are probably going to be floated in the next stock round. The NYC has a ton of cash, and in theory could buy into the 5s right now. I don't think we're going to see that, but this is very aggressive play from MP Coin, very kind of short-sighted. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that he's very focused on the next operating round rather than later in the game right now, which may come back to bite him. B&O upgrades his home, runs for 60. NYC, do they just buy into the 5s here? The other company he has is the B&O. I suppose that would put him in a little bit of trouble on the B&O if he pushed trains too aggressively, but I still think it would be reasonable to do it. I guess if you buy in the 5s here, you're giving brown track to MP Coin, who has 2 trains to take advantage of it. So maybe that's not great. maybe too aggressive. You can let somebody else buy the poison for. Heading down towards Pittsburgh, gets the token in Rochester. The NYC's runs are going to be pretty great. Pays for 120. CNO links up with Pittsburgh finally, and is going to just run for 110. PRR upgrades Pittsburgh, still running the same track with holding. B&M is running 2 trains for 160 and is paying it. NYNH 2 trains for 210, pays it. So MP Coin has the most, actually not the most, but nearly the most cash into this stock round, but a lot of impending train liability. Juicy Berry is going to be leading us off. He's selling out and will take the Erie. A. Murphy is going to, right off the bat, take the CPR. The CPR, I believe, has already been broken in terms of a suitcase. So 2 new companies floating. Very likely we're going to see the 5s come out early here. And if the 4 and the 5 is bought here, 2 5s here, we have an early 6 here, which is going to negate a lot of the good track that MP Coin has been taking advantage of. So we'll have to see how this matures. MP Coin going to be looking to do some trashing probably. Too Many Revenants is going to buy the high revenue companies of the B&M. Juicy still floating. A. Murphy is passing. Okay. MP Coin is going to pressure for the CPR presidency. Too Many Revenants still buying paying shares. A. Murphy is selling down to defend the CPR now. MP Coin still pressuring. Too Many Revenants is still buying paying shares. So I think what we're seeing here is 2 players kind of killing each other in the CPR shenanigans, and Too Many Revenants, who's already in a pretty strong position, is able to just go around and buy all these lucrative shares while A. Murphy and MP Coin attack one another. CPR is trashed. A. Murphy only had 40% of the company, so not as bad as it could have been, but still pretty bad. MP Coin has a bunch of cash now, but has lost a lot of tempo in this stock round in terms of fording good, attractive shares. Can't buy the NYNH, can't buy the B&M because he's cert locked. Cannot buy the CNO since he sold to raise cash for this trashing. And NYC is mostly bought, so it's going to be stuck buying B&O or basically sitting on cash, it looks like. Can also pick up a PRR or 2. Juicy now floated on the Erie. A. Murphy buying a CPR from the market. MP Coin, is he going to trash the Erie too? Not unreasonable. If those companies operate after the NYC, that will make it very unlikely that we'll see the 6 train come out before his 2 companies operate. So I think MP Coin is just in a rough spot here. He probably does have to trash these companies to have a chance at not having a super fast train rush where he just bankrupts. MP Coin buys up to 40% of the Erie, trashes it. So that's a little bit more painful for Juicy Berry than it was for A. Murphy. And now MP Coin is sitting on $450 with pretty limited places to put it. A. Murphy is going to sell out of the PRR and buys nothing. Okay. MP Coin buying paying shares now. So he is finding ways to invest his cash. A. Murphy is going to buy a random Erie share. MP Coin still buying shares. And we are into the operating round. NYC's first up. There was a big change in operating order here because of MP Coin's shenanigans or maneuvering. NYC probably not interested in buying the 4 and the 5 with 2 new companies trailing. He's going to pay for 120. B&O does get access into Lancaster and actually tokens it. I think that's probably not necessary. I would have liked to have seen the Gentle Curve upgrade west in a token in Pittsburgh because I'm anticipating the B&O player being able to run into New York via Philadelphia. There's very few upgrades. I think maybe 1 valid upgrade where this city gets laid into the double dit, which would not allow him to lay into New York. But all the other upgrades would either get into this track here or at Atlantic City. So with a run from the east, from New York, Philadelphia, and into Baltimore, he's going to want to head west into Pittsburgh. He's not interested in this Lancaster, I don't think. All right. Regardless, is going to drop the token that he does and pays for 120 CNO. And the I guess the other reason I'm thinking he wants that is because his NYC company is one track away from Pittsburgh. So if the B&O holds onto this token, the NYC gets into Pittsburgh, he can double token Pittsburgh and shut down the map for everyone. I think if that were to happen, Too Many Revenants just wins this game as long as he survives the train rush. Um, yeah, I mean he'll have cut the map in half. His NYC runs will be excellent. His B&O runs will be good. Um, yeah, so I really am going to criticize this Lancaster token. I think holding this and then tokening twice with the NYC company and a B&O on Pittsburgh would have been strictly better and probably assuring a win. CNO withholds. CPR, first new company to operate, is going to buy the 4 and the 5. That gives the Erie 2 5s. Erie is not going to lay any track. You're not going to suitcase the Erie, so you're just falling behind in tempo by not laying track here. Um, yeah, that's a missed opportunity. Buys the 2 5s. B&M does get the Brown upgrade into New York, so that's nice for him. And is going to run for 190, but has to withhold. PRR gets the New York upgrade and is running for 130, pays it. NYNH upgrading Boston. So really good track for him for right now, $300, but he is train locked and has very little treasury. So he's going to withhold again, and Bitcoin is in a rough situation. NYC gets into Pittsburgh, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. If he still had the Lancaster token on Pittsburgh with the NYC, quick token on the B&O, which is next to operate, and he is set. As it stands, he's not going to token with either company. And is he going to buy the 6? No. Um, hmm. So the 6 is available. I suppose doesn't want to fall back trainless on the B&O and then give the C&O the second 6. But he could buy the 6 here and then just emergency buy the 6 here. Wouldn't be terrible. And I don't think he wants these 3s to continue running. They are, quite lucrative right now. And he doesn't have the greatest 3 run himself. Okay. B&O is going to upgrade Lancaster. Not interested in this Philly upgrade. Shouldn't he be ensuring that this upgrades the way he wants so he can get a run from Baltimore into New York? CNO. This has been very interesting track to watch the whole game. So still developing in the West here. Runs for 150, pays it. PRR, two trains. And another player that's not going to upgrade Philly is hitting Philly twice, but doesn't upgrade it. Instead upgrades Pittsburgh. Withholding B&M, train lot, and withholds again. CPR, terrible revenue. Erie does lay himself track, but still can't run. Has a ton of money in the company, $400 in there, and the CNO is now got enough money for a second permanent train. With a withhold, should easily be able to get that. NYNH is going to withhold again. So MB Coin had to withhold, I think, 4 times in that set of operating rounds. That's really painful. Does have a fair amount of cash still. I'm not sure how that actually happened. I think most of this is probably cash from the last stock round. So I have to imagine his net worth has really fallen behind these other players here. He's going to buy a CNO. Too Many Revenants is buying the CPR. That's interesting. Juicy also going for the CPR. Can't imagine that company has much potential in this game. Don't know why those shares are being prioritized. A. Murphy, probably 1 share for him. He picks up a B&O. MP Coin is going to buy the CPR as well. And even from the IPO, what am I missing about this CPR? It looks like it's going to be terrible. I don't know. That's weird. I guess maybe they just don't feel comfortable buying shares in other companies. Is MP Coin worried that he's going to be opening himself up to a dump otherwise? I don't know. Too Many Revenants is buying the PRR. Juicy NYNH. A. Murphy's passing. MP Coin going for the CNO. That company's floating up. So does look like even though he's buying the CPR, is comfortable owning the CNO, which is potentially dumpable. I mean, it's not likely to be dumped, just because Juicy already has two permanent trains, but why buy the CPR if you're just going to buy the CNO anyways? Hmm. Too many revenants. Buying the Erie. Looks like everybody's passing, and that will leave Juicy Berry with priority. NYC, ton of cash, and I think now he really does have to buy this 6 because we see the CNO within with one withhold of the 6. So if he misses out on the 6, he's going to be running a D and either two Ds or a D and a 6. So he needs to make sure he gets at least one of these 6s early here, I think. Probably should have bought this before. Upgrading through Pittsburgh, still not tokening. This Pittsburgh token seems like it'd be very valuable. I'm not sure why it hasn't been snagged by someone. Pays it, buys the 6. Okay, so we're off to the races here. B&O is going to upgrade Baltimore and then has to sell, which is a little painful here, but does emergency buy the second 6. Looking at the game state here, that means that MP Coin is going to have to buy 2 D trains and only is halfway there on both companies. The runs for him on the D trains, probably not going to be great. The B&M is not going to be good. The NYNH is decent, but tokened at Rochester already, so needs to try and bypass that to have a really good D run. So, heading towards the 00, probably hoping to link up these two companies, the Erie and the CNO. Ton of cash in that company. Going to run for 180, pays it. PRR, halfway towards the D train, and is upgrading Philadelphia. So as expected, the B&O does have a run into New York through Philadelphia. PRR is withholding, very close to the D train upgrade. CPR heading nowhere fast. Runs for 70, withholds. B&M going to run his 4 train and also withholds. So a lot of withholds from MP Coin in this game. Erie still without a run, doesn't have cash for laying the 00. This company's fallen back a lot. NYNH is going to run and withhold, which puts him into the D train upgrade, which he immediately gets. So I don't think we'll see anybody struggling to buy the D train. There's been so much withholding. Everybody's pretty close to it in their two companies. But in terms of the amount of withholds required to do this, particularly for MP Coin, that's really going to be a hard thing to come back for, I think. That said, he's actually second in shares, so all the withholding really hasn't cost him an ability to buy shares. He's trailing Juicy Berry by 500. Not the end of the world. So actually managed that pretty well. NYC is going to get a run into New York or Baltimore, and finally we see that Pittsburgh token dropped. Very slow to drop that token. Runs for 250 and is paying it. CNO still heading over to those 00s and is going to run for 180, pays it, and actually shuffles the 5 out of Erie. So Erie has been falling back for like 3 operating rounds, maybe 4 operating rounds, and it's going to fall back again. Does finally have cash in the Erie to lay this 00. Boy, that's been very inefficient track. B&O is running his 6 for 290, pretty good, pays it. PRR, brand new D train coming out there. CPR finally gets into the offboard and is running for 120. Probably is not going to be running for very much more than that for the rest of the game. B&M has to buy a D train and is hopefully going to bypass Albany here, but would also need this Rochester bypass to be opened up for it to be really worthwhile. Has to sell a couple shares here and does afford the D train. So we were looking at MP Coin's net worth and shares probably prematurely before he actually bought his D trains. And now we start to see the damage of the train rush. Now trailing in shares and very far behind in net worth. NYNH is going to work on this Rochester bypass, and it actually has a decent D run now, 290. Erie, trainless, does get the upgrade on the 00, and is actually going to sell out for a D train of their own. That is aggressive. Interesting. So has 2 5 trains in the CNO. CNO's track has been very strange this game, but probably is actually decent for D runs or for 5 trains. Has 2 runs into Chicago, which is going to be pretty lucrative in and of itself, and has uncontested control of this double O. So yeah, that's going to be a good run for the CNO. The D run in the Erie, that's going to need a lot of help. I don't know what that's going to look like. We'll have to watch that. NYC, first company to operate in 7.3, heading towards Chicago. Runs for 250, pays it, CNO, 2 5 trains, gets the 00 upgrade, and is going to run for 430. Very nice. B&O, not a whole lot of track left for him to be laying, running for 290. CPR, how did this happen? Why does the CPR have a D trade? What is going on here? Um, that must have been bought across last operating round. I missed that. CPR bought the bought the D train here, and I think because somebody had to sell shares, the operating order changed, so the CPR gets to operate before the PRR. But why was this done? He only gave $2 to the PRR. PRR didn't need cash for anything. Ugh. So just losing around on the D train unnecessarily, that's an unforced error. Okay, running for 130, and then the PRR falls back trainless. The PRR has an excellent D train run, so losing this run is inexcusable. Does buy it back out of the CPR. I don't know what that was about. Maybe that's just a misclick. B&M is still working on getting past Albany. This is very blockable, and I think if you're the NYC player, you probably are incentivized to do it. But actually already missed that opportunity because the NYNH is going to operate before the NYC and can lay this track for the B&M, who now has runs into the 00. So that D train is going to be decent too. Running for 240 for now, pays it. NYNH lays that track as expected. And running for 290, Erie with the new D train running for just 160, and is going to withhold it. And that must be a play to stay brown. Juicy is first in priority. So if they had paid here, they would have been an orange. By withholding, they stay brown, and they're going to end up running 100% of this company. So that's pretty exciting, actually. When you are running for 160, that's not exciting revenue usually when you only own 60% of the company. But if you own 100% of the company, now you can translate that to a $300 run, usually. And a $300 run is pretty darn good. So Juicy has good runs in both their companies now and is going to have a big share lead because they just hoover up 5 shares. So is trailing Too Many Revenants by $800, but now ahead by 6 shares and has much better revenue in both companies already than Too Many Revenants does in either of their companies. And the Erie has room to grow. So another $40 here. And again, he's getting 100% of the revenue from this company. So $40 is truly $40 to your net worth each time the company runs. That's really powerful. Um, yeah, this game's not over. We'll see. A Murphy's up and is going to buy an NYC, MP Coin, NYC as well. Too Many Revenants, NYC. So everybody is hopped on this company and it's sold out. Does have the most share appreciation in the game and decent revenue. Juicy Berry, B&O. A Murphy passing on cash. MP Coin going to buy B&O. Too Many Revenants is share locked on the B&O, so we'll go back for the yellow NYNH. Juicy Berry, B&O, that company's floating up. A Murphy now buying an NYNH. So not sure why we saw a pass there. Losing tempo in these stock rounds is so important. There's valuable shares that are available, and just giving them away to other players is really devastating to your chances of winning. MP Coin buying a PRR. Too Many Revenants. Still focused on these yellow shares. Probably realizing has quite a share deficit and needs to make sure they don't run into their cert limit. Juicy Berry's passing because they're out of cash. A Murphy still passing, still has money for shares. Why not buy this BNMD? I don't get it. MP Coin buys the CPR, Too Many Revenants, gonna pick up that BNMD. So if you're Juicy Bear and you're watching, A Murphy pass on shares here, that's frustrating because your opponent is now able to get shares they wouldn't otherwise be able to buy. A Murphy now goes back and buys a more expensive share from the BNM out of the IPO. MP Coin buying the CPR. Too Many Revenants has been allowed to hoover up a ton of these yellow shares. So that's good for him. MP Coin floating the CPR, and I think everything has been bought here, so there's literally no more shares to buy. Juicy Berry is going to end up with a 3-share lead on Too Many Revenants, and is third in net worth. MP Coin is technically ahead and has decent runs on both of his companies, so can't be discounted either. I think A Murphy is done. The CPR is just no good. But any of these three other players, I think, could and potentially take this game. Too Many Revenants is ahead, but the other players have things to argue for them as well. We're into operating round 8, and let's just look at the market here. There's $10,000, so there's 2 sets of operating rounds left. Yeah, with 6 operations, it could be anybody's game here. There's going to really be some key track decisions that are going to determine who wins this, I think. So we need to pay close attention to the Erie runs in particular, I think, and just monitor the revenue each round to see who's going to win this. Too Many Revenants is getting a run into Chicago, which is just $10 better than Baltimore, running for $280. So actually a $30 increase in revenue may have just been able to take advantage of someone's upgrades the last operating round. Pays out C&O 2 5-trains and is upgrading this track here. I don't know if he's going to be able to run that. Runs for 430, still really good revenue. B&O running for just 290, pays it. CPR heading towards the double O's, it looks like. 130. B&M is able to run into the double O for 290. That's pretty good for MP Coin. NYNH also running into the double O for 290. PRR on the yellow zone is heading down towards the Gulf, maybe. Runs for 390. The Erie now has been able to get access to Pittsburgh. And again, small increases in the revenue of this company have a really disproportionate outcome in terms of Juicy Berry's position in this game. So $40 is much more consequential than it usually is. Running for 200 now, pays it out. We're into operating on 8.2. And I think that we can get an idea of what's going on here with the revenue. So Juicy is $700 behind, only running for barely over 100 more than Too Many Revenants. That is going to be too little to come back into this game. But if there's increases in the revenue, it's going to be close. So we still have to watch this. NYC not laying any track. C&O, I think, hoping to get the Erie a run into Lansing and then down into Toledo and Chicago. And that would be a big increase in the revenue of the Erie and probably enough to give Juicy the game. So very reasonable to shoot for that, and we'll see if they're able to pull it off. B&O, no track really, paying it out. CPR gets into the double O. This is a little bit of a liability for Juicy. It doesn't have token money, but if A Murphy decided to withhold, could start cutting runs with a token in one of these double O's. I don't think it's a huge deal though. Runs for 140, pays it. B&M, no real track left. Running for 290. NYNH. Actually, I say no track, but both of these companies are looking to head up into this northern track. And if they were able to get up there and upgrade this sharp turn, that would probably be a pretty significant increase in both of their revenues. And also a potential run for the Erie up here and into Boston. So even if Erie doesn't get into Chicago, there's a potential that they could get into Boston, which would be another way to increase your revenue. PRR is, where are they laying tokens? They're still heading down towards the Gulf, paying for 390. Erie is looking towards the Chicago run. Runs for 200 still and withholds. is withholding to stay brown and is okay to end up in orange, but did have to withhold there or else would have ended up in yellow. So had to withhold one time here. If you're going to withhold, you want to withhold early before your runs increase. So is anticipating higher runs in the next set of operating or in the next operating round and the next set of operating rounds. So better to withhold here than in 8.3. Final operating round of this set. NYC is acutely aware of the Erie's aspirations to get into Chicago, blocks them. So I think that's a good move from Too Many Revenants, and is going to token in New York. This hurts the B&M run, but otherwise is inconsequential, I would say. CNO is not making much progress, just running for 430. B&O, still same runs. CPR lays the sharp upgrade, so everybody's going to be able to run this big loop when this gets upgraded here. Runs for 140 still. B&M has managed to connect into that northern track, and its run is going to increase by $90. That's big. Too Many Revenants is a benefactor here. Juicy Berry is not. And the NYNH also is able to take advantage of that track. So this is a big deal. You're increasing the Erie revenue by a lot, but Too Many Revenants has 4 shares in these companies that are both running for a lot more than they used to as well. So that may be a net wash in terms of the game state. PRR running for 390, paying it. Erie is, I suppose, trying to get into this track here. But both of these tracks have been laid, so this is never going to upgrade the way they want. Running for $100 increase in their net worth with each of the runs now, and pays it. So we're into the stock round. Looking at the spreadsheet here, Juicy Berry was running for $150 more than Too Many Revenants, but trails by $900. So probably not able to come back here. But when we look at the stock round, it actually is promising for Juicy Berry because Too Many Revenants has to sell a share here, and then Juicy Berry is able to buy that share. So that's a net change of 2 shares. And then MP Coin has to sell as well. And Too Many Revenants is already share locked, so these are all just free shares for Juicy Berry. So Juicy Berry is able to open up a pretty big share lead here, a 8 share lead in someone that needs to run for, net roughly $300 more than their opponent each operating round, trailing by less than $900. So with an 8 share lead and really good revenue, this is still possible for Juicy Berry. Let's skip this here. Just note that really these stock share track upgrades are kind of meaningless, and look at the spreadsheet. So Juicy Berry is running for $250-ish more than, or 200, I guess $70-ish more than Too Many Revenants. And we had said that they were probably going to have to average about $300 a operating round to come into the win. So may just fall just shy, but this has ended up being a very interesting game to watch in terms of this unconventional strategy and how close it is. I think we can just skip here and we'll see that Too Many Revenants takes this by a margin of about $60. So this game was balanced on a nice edge for Juicy Berry. A small decision here or there really could have put them over for the win. Very interesting game to watch, and a lot of unconventional strategy to comment on. Well played to Juicy Berry and Too Many Revenants. Too Many Revenants does ultimately take the win, so congratulations. Track Talk will be back for the 9th week of the league next week, and we are really in the home stretch here. Just 2 weeks left. So thanks for watching along.